Johnny Talk Sports here with the Week 2 NFL predictions. Last week I went 9-7, which isn't really that good, but it's not bad either. I will take a record like that. It's still above 500, considering that it was the opening weekend of the season. We didn't have really much to go off of due to limited off-season training camps and no preseason action to look at. I will take that. My goal for this week is to go at least 10-6, do at least one better than the week before. Before I get to my picks, let me just give out my team of the week. Now, my team of the week this week is the Washington football team. And the Washington football team is my team of the week because they pulled off a massive upset against the Eagles, and they demonstrated they are a team that isn't going to be a team to take lightly. I know that Washington has been kind of a laughingstock around the National Football League and by a lot of NFL fans. But this team, they showed heart. They sacked Carson Wentz 8 times last week. Now, part of that could have been because 3 of the 5 Eagles starting offensive linemen were not active in that game. That could have been part of it. But another part of it, I think that adding Chase Young to that defense and adding your defensive coordinator in Jack Del Rio and your head coach of Ron Rivera, a defensive guy at heart, ultimately shows that they are a very underrated defense. And I remember saying throughout the offseason that if the Washington football team, if they were to draft Chase Young, adding him to that defense could make them one of the best defenses in the National Football League. But that Washington defense, they will get a test this week against the Arizona Cardinals and Kyler Murray, which we will talk about later, along with all the other picks coming up. So now let's get into the Week 2 NFL predictions. And as always, we start with the Thursday Night Football game. And this week's Thursday Night Football game features the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Now this is going to be what I think is going to be a worth watching matchup. Now, I know that a lot of people, they have a tendency to bash the Thursday Night Football matchups. But this one is going to be worth watching. We get to watch Joe Burrow in primetime. We get to watch the number 1 overall pick in this past NFL draft in primetime. And what better way to go off for your primetime debut against the Cleveland Browns and Baker Mayfield, another number 1 overall pick. So a battle of 2 Heisman Trophy winners. But what sticks out to me for this matchup is despite the Bengals losing last week, off of what you can say is a controversial call, you can blame it on the kicker, you can do whatever you want with that. But ultimately, Joe Burrow, he looked solid in his debut this past weekend, and I think he is confident. I'm going to favor his confidence in this matchup, while the Browns, I don't think they're coming to this matchup confident at all. They got blown out by Baltimore, only putting up 6 points on the board. So I'm going to pick the Bengals in this matchup. Next, we have the New York Giants and the Chicago Bears. Now, the New York Giants, they did show some heart this past weekend on Monday Night Football against the Steelers. While the Bears, they came back from 17 down against the Lions. Now, they came back from 17 against the Lions. Now, I think if the Bears did that again this week, I don't know if they can get it done. Because this Giants team, they could also be classified as underrated. Although Saquon Barkley couldn't get going in the running game, the Steelers' defensive line is just completely superior compared to the Giants' current offensive line. And the Bears, they gave up 93 rushing yards to Adrian Peterson last week. Adrian Peterson. Which Adrian Peterson, yes, he still does have it, but he isn't getting any younger. And I'm going to pick the Giants in this matchup. I think this is going to be a game. This is one of the games this week that's probably going to be decided probably in the last minute of the game, maybe last few minutes. I think this is one of the three games this week that goes either way. I'm going to pick the Giants. Because I believe that Daniel Jones, he looked really decent on Monday Night Football this past weekend. He did throw 2 interceptions, and you can argue that maybe one of them he could have prevented. But I will pick the Giants in this matchup. The question for the Bears, if we see them down by 17 in the second half again, are we going to see Nick Foles, or are they going to still put their trust in Mitch Trubisky? Next, we have the Atlanta Falcons and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, both of these teams are coming off of devastating losses. The Cowboys, you can argue and say that they were robbed in that game with that offensive pass interference call against Michael Gallup in the waning moments of that game. But if you ask me, yes, it looked like it was a good sell by Jalen Ramsey. Probably a call that maybe shouldn't have been called, but the Cowboys shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with. Because earlier in that fourth quarter, they had an opportunity to take 3 points instead of go for it on 4th and 2 from, I believe it was about the 11 or 12 yard line. They ultimately didn't get it, which ultimately I think cost the Cowboys in that matchup. Because if they take those 3 points, tie up the game, the Rams play calling would have been different, and the Cowboys would have gotten to run much different plays. Maybe we could have seen Zeke have more of an impact on that final drive. Now, here's what I think of this matchup. Now, let's get into the Falcons from last week. Now, I told everybody so. I completely told you so, that the Falcons' defense is atrocious. Now, there are talks about the Cowboys' defense not being good, which maybe the Cowboys' defense really isn't good. Maybe it's not necessarily good at all. But guess what? The Falcons' defense is a lot worse. And the Falcons, they really aren't that good offensively either. And I don't care what the stat line says. Oh, but Matt Ryan threw for 450 yards last week. Well, guess what? More than half of those yards, they were in garbage time. They were in garbage time in the Seahawks. They were more relaxed in that game, knowing they had the game wrapped. It's just something to remember. And also, a bit of those 450 yards, they came in after the Falcons. They recovered an onside kick that it didn't matter if they recovered it or not. They still lost by 13 points. And they made Russell Wilson look like an MVP frontrunner already this season. And I think they're going to do the same thing with Dak Prescott. I think Dak Prescott is going to look like an MVP candidate in this game because the Falcons' defense is still atrocious. CeeDee Lamb is going to look like one of the best receivers in the league. Even though it's going to be only his second game, I expect CeeDee Lamb to have a huge stat line in this game. I see CeeDee Lamb having a stat line of probably 7 or 8 catches, 89 yards, and probably a touchdown or 2. I'm probably going to start him in fantasy this week. I have that much confidence that the Falcons' defense will not be able to stop him. So I'm taking the Cowboys. Next, we have the Lions and the Packers. The Lions won a 17-point lead in the second half of the Bears. And the Packers, man, Aaron Rodgers looked like his old self, throwing 4 touchdown passes last week against the Vikings, 2 of them going to Devontae Adams. And really, there isn't really much for me to discuss here. Although the Lions, they probably could have won last week if Kenny Golladay was in the lineup. But Kenny Golladay is most likely going to be back this week. But I don't think it's going to be a difference. I think Aaron Rodgers now, he has confidence. He worked on his throwing mechanics in the offseason. He looked at his own footage, and he improved. And I expect to see Aaron Rodgers have a repeat performance of last week. I think Aaron Rodgers throws for another 4 touchdowns this week. He'll probably even get a 5th one, because he probably could have even gotten a 5th one against the Vikings. So I'm going to pick the Packers huge in this game. Next, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. Now, despite Derrick Henry not looking like the second half of the season last year, Derrick Henry only getting held to not even close to 4 yards per carry, he still managed to rush for 116 yards last week. And the Jaguars, they really didn't do well against the run or against the running backs last week against Indianapolis. While Gardner Minshew did look very efficient in the game. In fact, 19 for 20 and 3 passing touchdowns. So Gardner Minshew, you can argue, player of the week last week. But unfortunately, I think the Jaguars will get a dose of reality. I think the Titans, they will win this game. Although the Titans, they almost did lose to the Broncos. Steven Gostkowski missed 3 kicks last week on Monday Night Football. But I think the Titans, they won't really need field goals this week. I think Derrick Henry is going to run out the clock very well. He's going to keep the Jaguars on the sidelines, exhaust that Jaguars defense later on the game goes. I think the Titans will win this game. I expect Derrick Henry to average about maybe 5 to 6 yards a carry in this matchup. I'm going to take Tennessee. Next, we have the Minnesota Vikings and the Indianapolis Colts. The Vikings didn't look well at all defending the pass last week against the Packers. And the Colts, well, Phillip Rivers, he did throw 2 interceptions. And I think the Colts are going to bounce back this week. I just think that with the experience that Phillip Rivers has, and with a talented wide receiver like T.Y. Hilton, and with the running backs of Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, I think they're going to step up for the rest of the season with Marlon Mack being out for the season with a torn Achilles. And I think they're going to take advantage of the Vikings' inexperience at corner. So I'm going to take the Colts to win this matchup. I think it could be a shootout. I think we're going to see kind of a game that's going to reach the 30s. I'm going to say it's going to be probably about a 31-28 game in favor of the Colts. Next, we have the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins, they were pretty competitive against the Patriots last week in Cam Newton's Patriots debut. While the Bills, they looked dominant, but it was against the Jets, one of the worst teams in the league. And in this matchup, I anticipate that the Dolphins will be able to keep this close again this week. I think the Dolphins, they could have a good shot to win this game. But I think that Josh Allen is going to make some plays in the second half that Ryan Fitzpatrick will not be able to make. I'm going to take the Bills in this matchup. I think we're going to see Stephon Diggs getting on the action this week. I expect the Bills' running game to look pretty solid in this one because the Dolphins, they did struggle against the run this past weekend, giving up 75 yards and 2 touchdowns to Cam Newton. I can see Josh Allen having a kind of a performance like that against this Dolphins team. So Buffalo is my pick here. Next, we have the San Francisco 49ers and the New York Jets. And devastating news for the Jets as Le'Veon Bell is going to be out for multiple weeks. So they are going to Frank Gore at running back. Now, ultimately, I don't think this game is going to be necessarily close. I think the 49ers are going to bounce back after a heartbreaking loss to the Cardinals last week, but that was a hard-fought matchup. I knew that game was going to be very close. In fact, I'm sure a lot of us knew that was going to be a close game. But for the 49ers, this one won't be a close game. I think they're going to come out angry. They're going to dominate against the Jets. They're going to take advantage of this inferior opponent of the 49ers, that is the New York Jets. Sam Darnold, he's not really looking too well as far as his NFL career is concerned. It's starting to look like maybe the Jets made a mistake by trading up to get Sam Darnold. So I'm going to pick San Francisco in this game, and I don't think it's going to be even close. I think San Francisco wins this game by at least 14 points. At the least. I see Raheem Mostert completely dominating, as well as the entire running game for the 49ers. Next, we have the Los Angeles Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams coming off a Sunday Night Football win against the Cowboys, while the Eagles, they blew a 17-point lead at halftime against the Washington football team, ultimately allowing 27 unanswered points. Now the question is, what will the Eagles' offensive line look like? Because the offensive line for the Eagles, they have to step up and protect Carson Wentz this week after allowing 8 sacks to the Washington football team this past weekend. And when you look at the Rams' defense being led by Aaron Donald, a known harasser that is known to harass quarterbacks in the National Football League, I think if this comes down to defense, I'm going to pick the Rams. Ultimately, I think this does come down to defense. I'm going to pick the Rams in this matchup because I'm just not sure if the Eagles have any confidence at all going into this matchup after letting a game get away. In a game they were dominating early on in the game, they become dominated in the second half. So I'm going to take the Rams. Although this is that second, is what I believe, that second of 3 games this week that look like they can go either way. But I will take the Rams. I won't be surprised, though, if the Eagles do end up winning this game, though. Next, we have the Denver Broncos and the Pittsburgh Steelers. For the Broncos, I don't know what Vic Fangio was thinking about not using his timeouts on the final drive of that Titans possession. Could have at least saved some more time. Could have made the playbook a lot better. At least they could have had time to make maybe, at the least, maybe 2 better offensive plays. And for the Steelers, well, they look dominant against the Giants. Ben Roethlisberger, he looks proud to be back on that Steelers offense. And I like the momentum that the Steelers are on right now. Even though they was only the Giants, any win boosts confidence, especially for someone like Ben Roethlisberger, who missed almost the entire season last year with an elbow injury. So I'm going to take the Steelers in this matchup. Although I think the Broncos, they could keep this game close again. But if it comes down to a last-minute drive, I just don't like the Broncos' chances because history is against them. Next, we have the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers, the second game with Tom Brady under center. The first game, Tom Brady didn't look all that bad. I know he didn't look elite like he was back in the Patriots. The Buccaneers just made some costly mistakes in that matchup that ultimately led to them taking the loss. While the Panthers, they rallied against the Raiders, but ultimately it just wasn't enough as they fell just short. So with this matchup, can the Buccaneers defense stop Christian McCaffrey as they had a difficult time containing Alvin Kamara last week? I think if it comes down to a passing type of situation, I would favor Tampa Bay's defense stopping the passing game of Teddy Bridgewater, which I could see that coming down to what it's going to come down to as well. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay in this one to recover. I think there's no way that Brady loses 2 games in a row, although he did lose 2 in a row last year. I think it just took a game to kind of get back into the feel of things. That's one of the consequences of not having a preseason to go off of. You don't give teams the opportunity to get used to their offenses in a game setting. And I think now they have the game under their belt. I think Tampa Bay is going to go out, and I think they're going to play the best game that the franchise has seen in a while. So I'm going to take Tampa Bay. Now, next we have the Washington football team, my team of the week this past week, and the Arizona Cardinals. Now, what's ironic about the Washington football team being my team of the week, second place as far as team of the week was concerned, you could ultimately say it could go to the Arizona Cardinals, pulling off an upset against the defending NFC champion 49ers, a team that was about 10 minutes away from being Super Bowl champions. Now, this is going to be a game that I think this is that third matchup of the 3 that I've talked about that could go either way. Because when you look at what Washington did last week on defense, and you look at the Cardinals not addressing their needs for offensive line in the past 2 NFL drafts, it could come back to haunt them eventually. But what I think the X factor in this matchup is Kyler Murray's ability to scramble outside of the pocket. Because this Cardinals offensive line can't protect Kyler Murray. I think it's going to be a long afternoon for the Cardinals. But luckily, I see Kyler Murray being able to escape pressure, and I think he's going to scramble for some big plays the later on the game goes. Just like last week, I'm going to pick the Cardinals to go 2-0 on the season. Next, we have an AFC West showdown between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers coming off a victory against the Bengals, which I think can instill confidence for this Chargers defense. And I think that this game is going to be very close. I think this game will not be a blowout. I know I said last week that the Chiefs and Texans wouldn't be a blowout, but ultimately you can argue and say it really wasn't. You could say that the Texans, they played to the very end, only losing by 14. But I think the Chargers defense will be able to keep the Chargers in the game only for so long. Unfortunately, I just can't see the Chargers offense being able to outlast the Chiefs offense. Unfortunately, the defense only carried them so far. The defense won't be able to carry the Chargers this week. I think the Chiefs, they end up dominating in the second half, and they ultimately win the game. Next, we have the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. And you couldn't have asked for a more brutal start to the season for anybody than the Houston Texans. Having to go up against the Chiefs on opening night, and now having to go up against the Ravens in week 2, taking on the two powerhouses in the AFC Conference back to back. Just a brutal start for the Texans. Now, Texans fans, they still want Bill O'Brien fired. And ultimately, I can't see Bill O'Brien lasting to the end of the season. I think Bill O'Brien is ultimately going to get fired mid-season. Probably get fired maybe about week 10, week 11. And then their interim head coach is going to probably win maybe 4 of their last 5 games. And ultimately they'll name him the head coach. That's what I see happening. Now, what is going well for the Texans, though, for this matchup going into it, is they had some extra time to rest. Just like the Chiefs had extra time to rest against the Chargers, which I think is going to be another huge factor in that matchup, which I forgot to mention. But some extra rest for the Texans compared to the Ravens. That could work out for them. Unfortunately, I just can't see it. I just think that the Ravens defense, you can argue and say that the Ravens defense could be better than the Chiefs defense at this point. Because the Chiefs defense, they did kind of, it looked like that they were at least maybe relaxed a little bit. But Tyrann Mathieu did come out during the week and said that he was frustrated that the defense, they allowed points in that fourth quarter. They ultimately could have held the Texans just 7 points. Which the Ravens, they showed no mercy the whole time, only allowing 6 points to the Cleveland Browns. I will take the Ravens in this matchup because it's just hard to pick against Lamar Jackson considering what he's capable of. So I'm going to take the Ravens in this matchup. Next, we have the Sunday Night Football matchup between the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks. Last week for the Seahawks, Russell Wilson, an MVP-type performance. Only 4 incomplete passes last week against an atrocious Falcons defense. Part of that could be because of the Falcons' atrocious defense. Maybe we'll see Dak Prescott put up a performance like that against the Falcons this week. And for the Patriots, Cam Newton having a game under center as the Patriots quarterback. Although it was against the Dolphins, a team that arguably maybe not a playoff caliber team on paper at this point, but they could be later on the season. Maybe if they win a handful of games in a row, maybe they could be. But what I think the difference of the matchup is going to be is the Seahawks being used to stopping dual threat quarterbacks, considering that they see a dual threat quarterback in Russell Wilson. And ultimately, I know there's going to be no fans at the Seattle game this week. In fact, I don't really know if really many teams are going to have fans this week, although I'll get into it at the end. But I just think Russell Wilson has the confidence this week to put up a big performance. Though we don't really know how the Seahawks could defend against the run, considering that we didn't really see the Falcons run the football that much, if at all, in the second half, due to them being down by so much in the second half. But I will pick Seattle in this matchup. I just think this is going to be a season where Russell Wilson's MVP. In fact, if you ask me my early prediction for MVP, I would say Russell Wilson is my favorite right now after week 1. And I think he's going to put on another MVP type performance against the Patriots. I think the Seahawks win this one. I think Russell Wilson will make a clutch play in the fourth quarter. It will be the difference maker in the game. I think the Patriots hang in there, but I think the Seahawks win it at the very end. And finally, your Monday Night Football matchup, the New Orleans Saints versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Saints defense looked dominant against the Buccaneers last week in Tom Brady's debut as a Buccaneer, while the Raiders, they win their first game as identified as the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, this is their home opener, unfortunately with no fans in attendance. Now, ultimately, what I see a confidence booster with New Orleans defense. I think we're going to see another game like that as far as the New Orleans defense is concerned. I think the Raiders are going to have a hard time with Alvin Kamara because they had a difficult time with Christian McCaffrey last week. And I don't think you could have asked for a more difficult task to start the season than to contain Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara in back-to-back weeks. And I think the Saints will win this game. I think quite convincingly. I'm going to say convincingly by about 13 points. So those are my picks for the week. Those of you keeping track, I like the Bengals, Giants, Cowboys, Packers, Titans, Colts, Bills, 49ers, Rams, Steelers, Buccaneers, Cardinals, Chiefs, Ravens, Seahawks, and Saints this week. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.